Man, I'm ashamed I didn't see this sooner. There's a massive, massive swindle going on with non-government organizations whose executives are making tons of money bringing illegal immigrant children into the country. And it is the same swindle as was done with homeless people in Seattle for the same reasons. Money is part of it, power is another. It never ceases to astonish me how that statement I made years ago, that the separate country of Seattle is the testing ground for everything they intend to do to the country, it always comes true. So I want to talk about how you get rich off the bodies of homeless people and how this same swindle is being used with the illegal immigrants coming into our country. The parallels are stunning. Most people don't know about this. The method they're using here was pioneered in Seattle. Seattle put out a notice to the world's homeless people and said, we want you to come here. And that, I think, was inspired for real by the Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh. I know it sounds nuts. The Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh came over from India, himself an illegal immigrant, and he settled in Oregon. And he began to bring followers in. He had a goal of taking over city government. Brilliant. So he started to bring in a bunch of people to this small town in Oregon. There's a Netflix series about this, which is astonishingly good. So he starts to bring in enough people to take over the city government, and it worked. All of a sudden, the cops in that city worked for the Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh, a cult leader. Then he set his sights on taking over the county. So he began to take his people out to places like Denver, Colorado, where it was cold, and this place in Oregon was pretty warm, and he would bring them from Washington, D.C. and Chicago. He would bring them on buses under the pretense that he was going to use his magic voodoo to cure them, and he would give them free beer and then ended up drugging them. Now, they caused a bunch of problems on his retreat, so it had mixed results, but they got to vote because they'd moved into the county. And hey, if you want to keep your place, you're going to vote our way. You're going to vote for our people. He even was involved, allegedly, in a scheme to poison the county water supply. So he took that technique, and then in Seattle, they had this technique. Let's advertise, all homeless people come here. Criminal illegal immigrants come here. It's warm bodies. There's a real estate aspect to this that people don't understand. There's a business model aspect to this that really the national audience doesn't get, and you guys will go through that today. But what's happening at a federal basis, in some ways, is almost small ball, in some ways, to what's being done in the separate countries of Seattle. But they're getting there. You watch what they're going to do with real estate as they finally get around to making this thing work the way that they think it's going to be designed to work. So this article in the Free Press, thefp.com, quote, the amount of taxpayer money they're getting is obscene. This is these NGOs that are taking these little kids and placing them around the country. Some of them, of course, to go be sex trafficked. The amount of taxpayer money we're getting is close to obscene, Charles Marino says. He's former advisor to Janet Napolitano, the Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security under Obama. Well, she's that nice lady who burned people down, burned them to death in Waco, burned people to death. Oh, then she took that little boy and sent him back to Cuba at the point of a gun. Yeah, she's a neat lady. So Charles Marino worked for her. He said, we're going to find out that the waste, fraud, and abuse of taxpayer money will rival what we saw with the COVID federal money. It's not a stretch. The Free Press examined 3 of the most prominent NGOs that have benefited from these monies: Global Refuge, Southwest Key Program, and Endeavor, Inc. These organizations have seen their combined revenues grow from $597 million in 2019 to an astonishing $2 billion by the end of 2022, the last year for which federal disclosure documents are available. And the CEOs of all 3 nonprofit groups reaped more than $500,000 in annual compensation, with one of them, the chief executive of Southwest Key, making more than $1 million. Yeah, but that's just pay. That's just paychecks. Real wealth is in ownership. We're getting there because in Seattle, it's about ownership. You know, real wealth is like real estate. Hey, they aren't making any more land. Stay tuned. I'll explain the swindle. back to the Free Press article with a chart. If you're on the video service, you can see this. It's a helpful visual guide. If you haven't yet subscribed, you should do that today. Go to video.thetoddhermanshow.com. Yep, there's a CEO compensation. $1 million Southwest Key programs up from, 250 grand. All of a sudden, it's 1 million. Endeavor. Well, they're just floating around. Was it 2020? They're up. Everybody's up. Everybody's getting paid more money. Now, why would that be? Because they're bringing in more money. But they're nonprofits, mind you. Back to the article. Some of the services NGOs provide are eyebrow-raising. Well, pause. The very service of trafficking children is somewhat eyebrow-raising. Don't you concur? When we don't know who these kids are, for the large part, we don't know who brought them in. We don't investigate the homes they're going to. We already know because Department of Homeland Security officials have admitted that, yeah, some of these kids are sex trafficked. Back to the article. For example, Endeavors uses taxpayer funds to offer migrant children pet therapy, horticultural therapy, and music therapy. In 2021 alone, Endeavors paid Christy Merrill, a music therapist, $533,000. An internal Endeavors PowerPoint obtained by American First Legal, an outfit founded by former Trump aide Stephen Miller, showed that the nonprofit conducted 1,656 people-plant interactions and 287 therapy sessions between April 2021 and March 2023. I know a few therapists. $500,000 a year? That's pretty good money. Remember, the average American earns about 50 grand a year, and they're the ones paying for this. That is, we're the ones paying for this. Further into the article. Endeavor's 2022 federal disclosure form also showed that it paid $5 million to a company to provide fill-in doctors and nurses, $4.6 million for consulting services, $1.4 million to attend conferences, and $700,000 on lobbyists. In 2021, the NGO shelled out $8 million to hotel management company Esperanto Developments to house migrants in their hotels. Endeavors, which gets 99.6% of its revenue from the government, according to federal disclosure forms, declined to comment to the Free Press. No kidding. Hotels. So they're paying to store people in hotels. Amateur hour. Oh, they'll get there. You're going to see these nonprofits start to purchase land to house people. There are, in fact, entire housing developments being planned to house illegal immigrants. There are, in fact, entire classes of IDs being created to house illegal immigrants. There are loan programs in separate countries like California being designed for illegal immigrants where they never need to pay a dime down and they never need to pay against the principal, but they continue to gain equity in the house. Think of this. When they move out, they've rented a house they now get to sell. So any upside, any percent the house goes up in value, they get, even though they were renting it and here illegally. See, the banks know exactly what that is. That's a real estate play. We're going to put the illegal immigrants into these houses. They're going to rent them. Most of them are not going to be able to continue to pay rent. So we get the houses. We get the upside. Yeah, the bank gets paid back a little bit when the illegal immigrants sell the house that they've been renting. But they've never really had to take the risk, the banks, because, of course, it's all backed by the feds. Well, no, it's backed by you. This all started to sound very, very familiar. This is just the start. Bringing people into the country for it's not express, but the actual purpose of overturning the Electoral College count. That's what it's about. And then making money along the way. This is just a starter. And this is the story of how Seattle and San Francisco have done it. What they've said is, you come here, there are no rules. You come here and we're going to give you tiny houses for the homeless. We're going to let you shoot up. We're going to let you sex traffic. We're going to let you destroy yourselves, just so long as you stay in those little tiny garden sheds. If you've never seen these, If you live in any sort of rural area, there's these little businesses that will come and build a little outbuilding for you. It can be a tool shed. Some of them can be made into nice little cabins, actually some really nice cabins. These are just the garden shed variety. Yep, they're insulated. Here's where the swindle begins. San Francisco residents have been figuring out the cost of providing these tiny houses, but they still don't understand the play. And I'm going to get into the play. This is again from Yahoo Finance. San Francisco residents outrage over the cost of providing tiny houses for the homeless. Well, so what's the cost? The units would cost a reported $113,000 to construct. Considering that the average home in San Francisco costs nearly $1 million, the $113,000 per unit cost for tiny houses seems in line with San Francisco's notoriously expensive real estate market. Where's the outrage? First, it's much higher than nearby cities like Oakland and San Jose are paying to build comparable units. Second, the program is taxpayer funded. You're talking about garden sheds for $113,000 a month. You can build these for about $1,200. Making matters worse, most of San Francisco's housed residents are struggling to deal with the notoriously high cost of living. According to apartments.com, the average residential rental in San Francisco costs $2,800 per month. That's nearly double the national average of $1,514. So they're being frustrated because they're being told to pay $113,000 for a $1,200 gardening shed, but this is only the beginning. It's the real estate play that's so impressive. Oh, incidentally, the promise to the homeless people is the same promise they're making to the cartel members and the illegal immigrants. You don't need to follow the laws. You'll be able to purchase a house without ID. You get to fly in airplanes without ID. You get to have jobs without ID, and eventually you're going to be allowed to vote without ID. For the homeless people, you get to have these tiny sheds and never make a change in your lifestyle. They, in fact, fund people to not change their lifestyle. In San Francisco, they're now spending $2 million a year for managed alcohol programs. They're giving them booze, beer, and vodka. San Francisco is giving taxpayer-funded shots of vodka to homeless alcoholics in a $5 million program, and this is what their claim is, that this improves health. It improves the health of the residents. Here's how they do this. They'll say that vodka is the best of all the alcohols, that some of the grain alcohols are very, very bad, but potato alcohol is not that bad. These sweet wines with all the sugars, that's not good. That's diabetes stuff. So let's have them take vodka. They never intend to get them off of this. Just like the government never intends to have illegal immigrants go home or have to become citizens. The real estate play, though, is where this is all at. There's a group in Seattle called the Low Income Housing Institute, and I'd like you, if you're on the video service, to take a look at some of their financials. I think you'll find them interesting. This is from 2022. They have revenues of $75.6 million. It's pretty good. Expenses of only $52.1 million. That's pretty good. Total assets of $349 million. Total liabilities of $227 million. That's a healthy financial statement. How'd that happen? What the Low Income Housing Institute does is they store people in garden sheds. Oh, they purchase land to do that. Often that land is in downtown Seattle. Often they get grants to do that. Sometimes taxpayer, sometimes from other nonprofits. So they purchase blocks of real estate. And then what would normally happen is if you'd bought raw real estate, you'd have to do some capital improvements, right? You'd have to spend a lot of money, right? You'd have to build a high rise or something, or like a car wash or a parking lot, something. They park people in sheds. They never need to tear anything down. They just get government money to store people. They work with a number of groups. Lehigh does, Low Income Housing Institute. And they do the most fascinating thing. It has to do with political process. I'll tell you about that in a second. The income statements for the last year available at the Low Income Housing Institute, they're not the $500,000 that these other companies are making. Oh, pardon me, nonprofits, but they're impressive. Lynn Behar, an authorized representative, earned $188,000. Sharon Lee, the executive director, who interestingly is apparently very, very good friends with some very, very powerful Democrats in Washington state, earned $308,000. Ralph Nice, director of special projects and operations, $128,000. John Syverson, facilities manager, $122,000. And there's 15 more key personnel we could look at. This Democrat, by the way, one of them, is a former House Speaker, Frank Chop. He likes to steer money away from government programs, which are swindles in and of themselves, to a nonprofit he co-founded, like the Low Income Housing Institute. So here's the rest of the swindle. This goes back to the Bhagwan, probably to the Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh. This goes back to him. He wanted to take over a town. So he invited homeless people all around the country. He didn't just invite them. They brought them in by bus and airplane. They gave them free beer. And then they gave them drugs when they started to act out at his retreat, his cult retreat. By the way, he was also an illegal immigrant. He was near to taking over a county by bringing in voters. And Seattle's done the same. See, these groups that work with Lehigh, one's called FAIR, there's one called WHEEL, they get to use some of Lehigh's assets and programs to also store people in shacks. They never want to restore people. It's never about getting them off drugs or alcohol. It's housing first.